Alright, here's the make or break. This is the rack piston. This is the part I think that gives a lot of people the biggest headache and makes people not want to rebuild these units, just because you have all these ball bearings that go back inside, and it can be a headache. I'm not going to lie to you. So let's get started. At first you can see that I've already got the bearing guides already unbolted and the little hold down clip that goes with it. So I'm just going to take the bearing guides, sit them off to the side for a second along with the bolts that hold it in place. We're just going to deal with the rack piston right now. Now there's an end plug on this, and this is the side that faces like the outside of the housing where the big cup plug goes. Probably want to go ahead and grab a socket and remove this, which is what I did here. And I've already, it's on pretty tight. I've already got it. It's a 1-inch socket I use for this. So I've got it loosened up now. Take the plug out, sit that aside. This way now you have a good look all the way through the entire rack piston. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use a little bit of wheel bearing grease, and we're going to start feeding the ball bearings into this, and it'll feed around through a circular section inside where the follower, where the ball bearings go, and then the bearing guide goes on top, and that's filled with the remaining ball bearings, and then that goes in place and is bolted in. So first thing we want to do is get the ball bearings in here, and as I told you before, I've got two different colors here. There are silver or chrome, and then there's a darker color bearing. So those have to go every other as you put them in. What I did was took a little bearing grease, and I actually filled inside the groove that's in here that holds the ball bearings. So what I'm going to do is I push them in. I'm just going to make sure that these things are coated, and the point is to try to get these things to where they're held in place with the grease and they don't fall out, so we can because when the rack pinion when the steering gear is put back in, alright, so moving on, this is the rack piston assembly. This is probably the one thing that gives most people headaches, and with all the little ball bearings, and makes people not want to rebuild these units and pay $200, $300, $400 just to buy a new one already assembled. It's not that hard. It's just it can be a little fidgety, and you may have to end up doing it once or twice to get it right. It can be a pain, but it's not that much of a pain that I think it's worth paying $300 for someone else to rebuild a unit for you. Now there's an end plug on this. It's a 1-inch hex head, and for the purpose of putting these balls in, and then as the worm gear is fed in, to make sure that they don't fall out of place, use a 1-inch socket. And let's go ahead and take this out. I'm going to sit this off to the side. You have the bearing guides. Basically, it's held in place by this clamp, and then the ball bearings are held inside. So we're going to pack a little grease in here when we put our ball bearings in. But for now, we're going to put this off to the side along with the bolts and the clamp that holds that in place. So now we have our Teflon seal and the O-ring that goes underneath, and our different color ball bearings. So you got light and dark. So we want to make sure that those go in every other, so we get our preload right when it's over. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to remove this this Teflon seal and the O-ring underneath. So the last thing you want to do is get all the ball bearings in, get everything where you want it, and then you go fidgeting with this on the outside and you shake it, and then you have a mess and the ball bearings come out, and then you're starting from scratch. So while everything is empty, let's go ahead and take care of this now. And the way things have been going with these seals, every one of these has been hard as a rock. There we go. So let's see if we can get this bad boy off. I throw that off to the side, and then there is an O-ring underneath. It's good having a seal pick for these kind of things. Let's see if I can get this up. There we go. And the O-ring comes off. Yeah, and that's kind of crushed flat, and is not a whole lot of elasticity left to it. So that's off to the side. So we'll bring in our power steering fluid, and what we're doing is we're lubricating the O-ring to go back on. And this is pretty easy. This just pops right in place. And then we have our Teflon seal. Same thing. I'm going to work this around. Try not to stretch it if you can. There we go. So now we have new O-ring and new Teflon seal is in place. That's good to go. So now we don't have to fiddle with that later. Let me move my power steering fluid out of the way before I spill that. So now, like I said, we no longer have to mess with that. It's already on, so when we get these ball bearings in place, there's a better chance of them actually staying there. So what I did was, let's spin it around to the other side. You have the feed holes right here for the ball bearings. I'm sorry, these are the bolt holes, the feed holes for the ball bearings. So what I did was, come around this side, the grooves on the inside where the ball bearings ride in, took a little bit of wheel bearing grease, and I just put some grease down into that groove, and hopefully that's going to help hold these ball bearings in place as I feed them in. And remember, you want to go every other on the color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with silver. So I'm going to start with silver, and as I feed them in, so this silver ball is going to be the top ball on this side. So I have to remember that when I put this back together, the very first ball that makes contact with it has got to be the darker colored ball bearings. So I'm going to use a little bit of grease just to make sure these things are good and greased up. And I'm going to sit here and push these things in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the tape showing me pushing one ball bearing in after another. I'm going to get them all in place, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's done. So be back in just a second. Alright, I'm back. This is very slow and tedious. I took my time, I was very careful, and let's see the end result. You can see inside here, this light here, hopefully you can see, all the ball bearings are in place and are being held in with a little bit of wheel bearing grease just to kind of keep them in place. Now in the manual it shows that there's a specialty tool, a dowel pin that you can basically feed into the plug side, and it holds the bearings in place. And as the worm shaft gets fed in, as you put these two pieces together, you're going to turn the stub shaft on the other side, so this will turn and feed into the ball bearings, and then it pushes this plug or dowel out, and basically it feeds on. I'm going to try to do this without having the specialty tool. You could find by taking this inside reading with a mic, and then finding a dowel rod or something the same size. It's very close to a regular half-inch extension. You could probably wrap this with some tape and use that to feed inside, and that will kind of hold the bearings in place. I'm going to give it a shot without it, so we're going to see how that works doing it that way. So there are 24 ball bearings altogether, and I actually went to the interwebs and I looked, because I guess some of these racks were made, not particularly this design, but some of them are made with 26 ball bearings, and some of them have 24. And I've read a couple of rebuild sites that kind of went through how to do this, and they all came up with the same thing, 24 ball bearings. So I haven't lost any, which is a good part. So the ball bearings are fed into place, and what we're going to do is take the remaining ball bearings that we have, and we're going to put the last 6 into one of these guides. And what we'll do is I'm going to pack a little bit of grease on both sides and then put them in, and then that way when I put the cover back over, when I turn it up like this to bolt it in place, they're not going to just fall out the bottom. So we'll take care of that real quick. All right, I'm back. I had to do some quick memory check here just to make sure that I had this right. So the last, on this side here, the last bearing, ball bearing that's at the top, is dark. And over here, the last ball bearing at the top is silver. So I have to make sure that when I put these together, that I start, since this is dark, I'm going to start with silver, dark, silver, dark, silver, dark, and then go around, and I can bolt these in. So I'm going to take a nice glob of wheel bearing grease. I'm just going to block up both sides here enough that these bad boys aren't going to fall out. Put a little right here in the center groove. Okay. So, going with dark last on that side, go silver, dark, silver, dark, silver, dark, and that works out perfect. So we'll take the other half, put that together. This is my silver side, so I'm going to put that back in place here, and then our clip goes over. It says you're supposed to tighten these down to 4 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that's going to go that low, so I'm just going to tighten these with a 3/8 until they're somewhat tight, and then that should be ready to go. And tighten this down, and then I'm going to take this very carefully. We're going to sit that off to the side, and then next let's go ahead and drive our bearings into our new case. So give me a second to throw some parts around and be right back. Okay, now that we're back, let's address the case itself. And the case has a large bearing and 2 sets of seals and washers and a snap ring that goes in here. Here's the new bearing that is comes with the kit for this. I'm going to use a 1 1/4 socket on an extension, which is the perfect size to drive this bearing in. Plus, the bearing has a, let me see if I can move this thing up here so you can see. The bearing, you can see there's an inner lip. The bearing goes to that lip, and that puts it in the proper place. And this socket actually will not go down past that lip. So I know once I get to this point, I've pretty much driven it right to the spot where it needs to be. I have to look at it from that point. I may have to use one size down on a socket. I may have to drive it just a little bit farther down in there, but that should get it right to that lip and then prevent me from driving it too far down into the case. So we're going to lube the exterior of this with a little bit of power steering fluid, just so this thing goes down in there. It does not say, but there's also writing on this side, and that is the side I'm going to have top side when I put it in. Check, and it's going in very nicely. That sound? That sound is the socket bottoming out on the bottom of this lip. Ah, that's perfect. That's perfect. There's your bearing installed back in there, right to the depth it should be. And then now all that's left to do, straighten myself out here, is to get these seals back in place. Now there's two sets of seals that goes in here, and the snap ring holds everything in place at the bottom, or at the top, I'm sorry. Now the seals have a specific order that they go in. There's a single lip seal, and then there's a double lip seal. So you want to make sure the double lip seal is the one that goes in last. So we're going to put a little bit of power steering fluid down here in this ridge and on the seals, both inside and out, to make sure that they go down, goes smoothly. And this same socket will work for that. Alright, move this thing a little bit so you can see. We're starting with that single lip seal, and I want to drive this down into place just enough so I can start this next seal. So it's the seal and the washer, and then we have our double lip washer now. That's the next one to go on. Same procedure, a little bit of power steering fluid on the outside. Also, let's lube up the inside of the lip. Make sure we still got a little bit of lubricant here. Second seal is going to go in. You have metal washer, and then we'll continue to drive this. I think there is a bit of a gap between these seals in the bearing. So if you just use the bearing as a stop and drive all these down, you're going to have a gap at the top between where this clip goes in and holds it in place and where the actual seal ends. So I try to make it so that the this washer is sitting right next to the clip, so it kind of holds it in place, and I know everything is good and it's not going to move around during assembly. So get this down. Okay, and then we'll just drive this carefully into place. Is that enough? Almost. I think that's going to be enough to put my there. Alright, snap ring is in place. That's what it looks like when you're done. Now, all my seals are in, bearings in. That's the only thing left to do for this. So now it's time to man up. We got to put all these parts back into here, assemble all the guts. The stub shaft end goes in first with the worm gear assembled. Once that's in, then we feed our rack piston in from the other side. And then while turning this, you're going to feed that worm gear onto those ball bearings, and hopefully they don't fall out, and we feed them all the way in, and then all we do is we install our plug back onto the end of that rack piston when we're done. That's 75 foot-pounds to torque that down, and then all that's left to do is put the sector shaft back in, and it's back together. So give me a second. I want to clean some of this up and move some tools out of the way, and then we'll come back and we'll start putting this bad boy together.